Sprawled on the cold kitchen tiles, I clutched my abdomen, the sharp pain radiating through me as though a blade had twisted deep inside. My breath came in shallow gasps as the agony intensified. Catherine, my young daughter, stood nearby, her face etched with concern. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Through gritted teeth, I forced a calm tone. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. It's just a bad stomach ache," I lied, trying to shield her from the severity of my condition. Footsteps approached, and my husband, Willie, appeared in the doorway. His expression was more annoyed than concerned as he looked at me, suitcase in hand. "What's happening, Amy? Why are you on the floor?" His voice was edged with irritation, not alarm. "I think it's appendicitis, Willie. It's really severe. We need to go to the hospital," I gasped, each word punctuated by waves of pain. He scoffed dismissively. "Appendicitis? You're probably just overreacting. It's probably just indigestion." I tried to argue, but a sharp stab of pain silenced me. Willie glanced at his watch, impatience flickering in his eyes. "I can't miss this trip with Carol. Just call a taxi or something," he said, waving his hand dismissively. My disbelief grew as I tried to speak again. "Willie, I can't even move. Catherine's here. I need you," I pleaded, my voice heavy with desperation. He shook his head, unmoved. "It's probably nothing. Call if it gets worse," he said curtly before turning to leave, his suitcase trailing behind him. I lay there, pain racking my body, with only Catherine's small hands in mine for comfort. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Mommy, don't be sick. You have to be okay," she sobbed. Gathering the remnants of my strength, I pulled her close. "I'm here, darling. Mommy's here." With Willie gone, urgency gripped me. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed the one person I knew would come, my brother Russell. The phone rang, slicing through the silence of the kitchen. "Hello." Russell's voice was a beacon of hope. "Russell, it's Amy. I need help. I think it's appendicitis. I can't move." I rushed out, each word a struggle against the pain. "Catherine is scared," I managed to add, my voice breaking. After a brief silence, Russell's calm and reassuring voice came through the phone. "I'm on my way, Amy. Hold tight. I'll be there soon." Resting on the cold tiles, I closed my eyes, trying to withstand the sharp pain that coursed through me. Catherine stayed close, her small presence a slight comfort amidst the chaos. In that moment, a resolute feeling took root inside me. Willie's neglect in such a critical time was not just hurtful, it was a profound betrayal. Something had shifted, and I knew things were bound to change. Later, in the sterile hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of machines became a strange comfort. The surgery to remove my inflamed appendix had been successful, but the emotional wound Willie had inflicted lingered. I had called my parents to look after Catherine while I recuperated, and their voices brimmed with concern. The unasked questions about Willie's absence hung heavy in the air. 2 days later, I returned home, the physical pain now a dull ache, a faint echo of what had transpired. Catherine's joy at seeing me again was a bright spot. "Mommy, you're back. Are you all better now?" Her innocent question warmed my heart. "I'm getting there, sweetie," I replied, pulling her into a tight embrace, grateful for her comforting presence. But our peaceful reunion was short-lived. The next day, the door slammed open, and Willie and his sister Carol burst in, frustration in their voices. "Why didn't you pick us up yesterday? We had to pay extra for a taxi and train fares." Willie's accusatory tone filled the room as he strode into the living room. A surge of anger welled up inside me. "Welcome back. Must have been quite a journey," I responded coldly, meeting his gaze. Willie stopped, taken aback by my frosty reception. Even Carol seemed surprised by the palpable tension. "What's with the attitude, Amy?" Willie demanded. I couldn't hold back any longer. "While you were enjoying your trip, I was in the hospital," I said, my voice calm but charged with anger. I glared at Willie and his sister, whose demands often pulled him away from his family responsibilities. Carol's face turned red and Willie looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? You're fine, right?" he asked dismissively. "It's not just about being okay, Willie. It's about being there when your family needs you," I retorted, my frustration reaching its peak. Before Willie could respond, the door swung open, revealing Russell, our parents, and Willie's parents. Their eyes, filled with varying shades of anger and disappointment, were fixed on Willie and Carol. Willie's voice trembled as he asked, "Why is everyone here?" His usual confidence had faded under their intense scrutiny. Taking a deep breath, I realized that this moment, this confrontation, would be the turning point for everything that followed. I gathered every ounce of strength I had left to express the hurt and betrayal that had built up inside me. "Willie, you left Catherine and me alone when we needed you the most," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I was in the hospital, and you weren't there." I had shared everything with our families, and as I spoke, Willie seemed to shrink before my eyes. His usual bravado was gone, and his gaze flitted around the room, searching for an ally, but finding none. "It's not just about this incident, Willie," I continued. "It's about all the times you've put Carol before your own family." Russell, his disappointment clear, added his voice to the confrontation. "You've been neglecting Amy and Catherine for far too long." Carol, once so confident, now shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes bounced between the floor and the upset faces around her usual arrogance faltering. Willie scrambled to defend himself, offering excuses and justifications, but the room was thick with tension. I could feel it. This was a pivotal moment. I realized then that I could no longer live in the shadow of Willie's neglect. It was time for a change. It was time to stand up for myself and protect Catherine. The meeting ended without resolution, but for me, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer tolerate being overlooked. The message from that day was clear. I had the support of our families, and Willie's indifference had finally crumbled. As our relatives filed out, his parents gave me sympathetic looks, an unspoken admission of their son's shortcomings. That night, as I lay in bed, the day's confrontations replayed in my mind. Anger, disappointment, but also something new, a growing sense of empowerment. Willie's true colors had been revealed, and I knew it was time for me to take control of my own life. The following days were filled with tension. The silence between us was heavy, and though Willie tried to act as if everything was normal, the air was thick with unresolved emotions. During this time, I reflected on the deep unhappiness I had been carrying for so long. The decision I was edging towards wasn't easy, but it felt necessary, like taking a long overdue breath of fresh air after suffocating for too long. One evening, while Willie casually flipped through TV channels, I approached him, a folder in my hand. My heart pounded, but my resolve was unshakable. "Willie, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He glanced up, irritation crossing his face. "What now, Amy?" he asked, dismissively. Taking a deep breath, I handed him the folder. "I want a divorce," I said, each word final and unyielding. "I want a divorce," I declared, my voice steady, though my heart raced. Willie stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face before it was replaced with scorn. "Divorce? That's absurd, Amy," he retorted, a mocking edge in his tone. "You're blowing this all out of proportion." I shook my head, a surge of empowerment rushing through me. "It's not an exaggeration," I replied. "I've thought long and hard about this. You've consistently put Carol before me and Catherine. I can't keep living like this." Willie's sneer deepened, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think you can manage on your own? Don't be naive, Amy." His words were meant to wound, but I stood my ground, my voice unwavering. "I'm not naive, Willie. I know what this means, but I'd rather face the uncertainty than keep feeling invisible in my own marriage." He laughed bitterly, the sound cold and harsh, echoing in the tense air. "Good luck, Amy. You'll regret this when you realize how tough it is out there." His dismissive tone only fueled my resolve. I felt my anger rise, not just at his words, but at the years of being sidelined, of feeling like I didn't matter. This moment, though fraught with challenges, was a new beginning for me, a step toward reclaiming my life, my worth. I kept my composure, my voice steady. "This is my decision, and I'm sticking to it." For a moment, I thought he might argue further, but instead, he just shrugged, a smug smirk spreading across his face. "Fine, have it your way. But remember, I warned you," he said dismissively, turning his attention back to the TV, ignoring me once again. In the midst of the whirlwind of emotions, fear was present, but it was overwhelmed by a deep sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking charge of my own life, stepping out of the shadows. The next day, I began the legal process for the divorce. The paperwork, the procedures, they were daunting, but my resolve was firm. My parents and my brother Russell offered unwavering support, helping me navigate the process with encouragement and guidance. Willie's true nature became more apparent as the divorce unfolded. He was dismissive, uncooperative, and tried to intimidate me into backing down. But I stood my ground, bolstered by my family's support and my own growing sense of empowerment. As time passed, the cracks in Willie's facade grew wider. The charming, confident man I had once married revealed himself to be selfish and manipulative. His true self was exposed for all to see, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The divorce proceedings were grueling, with Willie's constant attempts to belittle and undermine me. In our meetings, he sneered at my parenting, mocked my future without him. But instead of breaking me, his words only fueled my determination. "Enjoy your struggles, Amy," he taunted during one of our final meetings. "You'll soon see how good you had it with me." His arrogance was infuriating, but I remained composed. I'd rather face challenges every day than spend another moment with someone who has so little regard for his family, I replied firmly. Willie's smug demeanor faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of anger, but he quickly masked it with a scoff. I knew then that my resolve had struck a nerve. I was moving forward, no longer tethered to his disdain. When the divorce was finalized, I felt a peculiar mix of relief and anxiety. I was free from Willie, but the path ahead felt daunting. Yet, as I stepped out of the courthouse, a wave of liberation swept through me, revitalizing my spirit. In the weeks that followed, Willie's life began to unravel. His neglectful behavior during our marriage and the news of our separation became hot topics at his workplace. Those who had once admired him now looked at him with pity and disdain. His charming facade had shattered, revealing the pettiness and selfishness beneath the surface. The news of our divorce spread quickly through our community, thanks in part to my well-connected cousin. Willie, who had always been deeply concerned about his image, suddenly found himself the subject of whispered conversations and judgmental glances. Carol, too, was not spared from scrutiny. Her involvement in our marital issues became widely known, and people began to view her with suspicion and disapproval. The once solid bond she shared with Willie now seemed strained and uncomfortable. One evening, as I picked up Catherine from school, I overheard a fierce argument between Willie and Carol outside their house, their voices thick with anger and resentment. "It's your fault we're in this mess," Willie shouted, his frustration palpable. Carol's reply was just as sharp, her voice laden with fury. "How dare you blame me? You're the one who couldn't keep your family together." Their public quarrel stood in stark contrast to the image of unity they once projected. The cracks in their relationship had deepened, and now they were reaping the consequences of their selfish choices. As I walked away with Catherine, a sense of vindication washed over me. It was clear. Willie and Carol were now facing the fallout of their actions, and it felt like a bitter yet deserved lesson. That night, as Catherine slept soundly in her room, I stood by the window, lost in thought. The past few months had been an emotional roller coaster, but they had ultimately led me to a place of strength and self-respect. I had fought for my dignity and for Catherine's future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I felt ready to face it with newfound confidence. In the aftermath of the divorce, life began to settle into a quieter, yet more fulfilling rhythm. The weight of my unhappy marriage had been lifted, and in its place, I found the freedom to rebuild my life. Step by step, with Catherine by my side, I began the process of starting over. Finding a job was my first priority. The gap in my resume due to years spent focused on motherhood was a challenge, but I remained determined. After several interviews, I secured a position at a small accounting firm. The firm, led by a supportive woman who understood the demands of motherhood, offered a flexible and accommodating work environment, a perfect fit for me. Catherine adapted to her new life with surprising resilience. She thrived in kindergarten, making new friends and eagerly diving into her studies. Her laughter and enthusiasm brought a warmth and joy to our home, a welcome change from the tense atmosphere that had once clouded it. Still, there were moments when the ghosts of my past with Willie resurfaced. One afternoon, while dropping Catherine off at school, I overheard a group of parents gossiping. "That's her, Amy. Her husband left her because he couldn't stand being around her anymore," one of them said. Their words stung, but I held my head high. The gossip and judgment felt like small prices to pay for the peace and freedom I now had. Meanwhile, Willie's life continued to unravel. His pride had taken a hit, and his once pristine reputation was now tarnished. I learned through mutual acquaintances that he had moved back in with his parents, a detail he tried desperately to keep secret. His fall from grace was unmistakable. Eventually, news of Willie's return to his parents' home spread, as did Carol's deteriorating situation. Her involvement in our marriage had alienated many of her friends, and her relationship with Willie was now a shell of what it once was. They barely spoke, their connection strained by blame and regret. For me, the support of my family became my anchor. My brother Russell had moved closer, providing unwavering strength. My parents showered Catherine with love, helping to heal the wounds of the past. One day, while sipping coffee in my kitchen, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain, the struggle, and ultimately the liberation, it had all led to this moment of tranquility. I hadn't just survived, I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. My reverie was interrupted by the doorbell. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Willie standing there. The look on his face was one of defeat. "Amy, I'm sorry. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. His apology, though belated, validated everything I had done. I took a deep breath, offering a quiet response. "Thank you, Willie, but it's too late. I've moved on." As I closed the door behind him, a profound sense of closure enveloped me. That chapter of my life was over. A new one was beginning, and this time, I was the one writing the story. From the living room, I heard Catherine's voice, full of energy and life. A smile spread across my face as I walked toward her. The future was open before us, burning with hope and possibility.